Good morning. My name is Chris Adam with Youth Pledge for Employers. I'm delighted to be joined by Harry Seaton, the MD of Fluential. Hello, Harry.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for giving up your time this morning. And I guess my sort of start of a 10 question has to be, can you tell us about Fluential, sort of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, yes, my name's Harry. I'm 26. I run Fluential, which is an influencer and social marketing agency. We're based in Kings Lynn in Norfolk, and we essentially we partner with companies and brands both local to Norfolk and national and even international, and assist them with how best to make use of social media influencers. So we're on rather than kind of managing influencers and their careers, we're more kind of sitting with the companies themselves and identifying people for them to work with, what they should do, and making it happen.
That's brilliant. It's never easy to sort of concisely explain what your organisation does, and like a couple
Yeah.
of, a couple of sets and stuff. So thanks for that. And just to sort of maybe like further drill home exactly what you do, if you had to give us sort of an example of maybe sort of, as you say, a relationship you've developed between as I say, a client and what they've requested, or that kind of thing, obviously without revealing any names or anything like that, can you give us an example of, as I say, sort of how your company has helped someone in that way?
Yeah, of course. So it can be kind of very kind of basic all the way through to things that are more complex. So it could be from assisting a large online mattress company, helping them find kind of popular home and lifestyle influencers and gifting mattresses to those people in exchange for content that promotes those services. Or it could be, for example, we do a lot of work with like police forces and the National Crime Agency to use influencers to raise awareness around kind of increase in crime and how it can best be tackled, all the way through to sometimes quite trivial things, but things that work really well for our clients. So we work with Ada Flux Insurance, big Norfolk-based insurer, and we do a lot for them, from kind of organizing racing track days for influencers through to big massive parties. But one thing that we do on a daily basis for them is arrange kind of insurance deals where they kind of give priority rates or free insurance to content creators in exchange for promotional content. So we're kind of involved in so many different ways. There's so many different elements to it.
That sounds really, really interesting. And yeah, I wouldn't have expected to have that many elements to it, as you've just explained there. And like, I'd say that anyone watching this video will be pretty sure, they know what an influencer is, if you see what I mean, and everyone will have sort of, their understanding of it. I'd be curious just, to get the explanation from sort of yourself, if you see what I mean, in terms of, I say, these are people you work with, on a daily basis, so if you had to sort of give your definition of a sort of an influencer and what they do, what would that be?
Of course. I think the key distinction to make is between kind of an influencer and a content creator, or what you may call just someone with followers. So, not everyone that you see that has a following online is an influencer, because, that's kind of been the term that's just been kind of bandied around now. And that's fair enough. That's a term that's easy to remember, and people, can kind of use it in the news, pick it up. But really, at the heart of it, an influencer is, someone who influences, someone who convinces people to do something. So maybe it's someone who's an expert at a certain hobby or skill, or in some kind of niche, whether that could be as kind of quirky and a niche as remote model building, all the way through to something more popular like playing an instrument or playing a sport. Or it could be someone who is really stylish and influences people in terms of their fashion choices and what they do. Or it could be someone who is just simply quite respected and authoritative, and that could be someone that could be used to kind of raise awareness to something more serious like crime. So it is someone who has built a following, but more than built a following, they kind of built a community of people who trust them, listen to what they say, and take it on board, and their actions are based on what that person says.
That's really interesting, and I've never thought about it in terms of, as you say, you almost sort of broke down the influencers sort of into the different ways that they gain their influence, as you say, whether it is through sort of experience, expertise, the product they're sort of making or what they revolve with. So no, that's really interesting. And you've already sort of touched on sort of the different things you do with Influential, and I take it there'll be different roles within the organisation to support all these various different functions. So, I'm not asking you to go over your whole organisation hierarchy, but if you sort of had to touch on some of the sort of key different roles within the organisation, can you just sort of tell us a little bit more about them?
Yeah, of course. So I think the first thing to note is kind of the most common role within the company is kind of a campaign, someone who's in charge of campaigns, you know, whether you're a campaign manager or you come in as kind of, you know, a campaign executive or whatever you might be. And actually, that kind of role itself covers a lot of different bases because there are a lot of different elements to a campaign, from, you know, finding the influencers to dealing with the client and, you know, kind of being a part of meetings and getting approval on the influencers, because there's a lot of different moving parts, all the way through to coming up with the idea of what these people are going to do, through to, you know, seeing it through, and even at the end, more technical things sometimes, such as paid advertising, content reporting, and all sorts of things. So, you know, it can be a mixture of, on a typical kind of campaign, as a campaigns executive or manager or whatever, it could be from, you know, you could be finding the influencers, sending a bunch of emails, getting everything approved, managing a kind of big sort of spreadsheet, checking content. So you're watching a lot of videos, making sure that they're okay, you know, making sure that they go out on time, filling back in with that spreadsheet, and then potentially running paid ads to support that. Obviously, throughout the, you know, organization, we also need people to, you know, kind of when we're running an event, to pull that together and make sure that that's happening, or some kind of live sponsorship. So we just recently had someone who was kind of in charge of making sure that a tour bus was wrapped for an influencer to go on a big podcast tour. So
wow.
there's so many different parts. And then obviously we also, you know, kind of have, you know, we need people managing our finance and making sure that the influencers are paid on time and everything. So, you know, there's quite a lot of different things, but I think obviously, yeah, the most common role, because the kind of campaigns roles, they focus on a campaign as a whole, and you'll have your own kind of campaigns, your own clients that you're managing. That's like the most common role, and that actually gives you a lot of variety within itself.
Thank you. Again, I know it's not easy to suddenly summarize different roles and the different projects and processes within a limited time. So no, I appreciate that. And sort of speaking openly and honestly, you know, this is I'd say a really desirable area for a lot of people to work in at the moment. I think, you know, I'm going to try and say this without sounding like, you know, like someone attempting to be cool, but you know, it's a trendy industry. It's, you know, it's growing. You know, it's you know, involves a lot of areas that a lot of people are sort of passionate about. You know, whether it's from, as I say, whether they get that passion for their own hobbies and their personal lives. You know, as I say, sort of, it's something that is growing and growing. So my question would be that there'll probably be a lot of young people watching this video who would be interested in getting into this kind of sector and doing these kind of roles. So from your view as the sort of, as an employer, and as I say, sort of as the MD of a company in this sector, what kind of things can they be doing now, if you see what I mean, before maybe they've got the practical experience or even the qualifications, you know? So what kind of things can they be doing in their spare time? What kind of things can they be putting on their CV so that when they do, you know, want to take steps into the sector, you know, they can really hit the ground running?
Yeah, I think the two kind of biggest things for me are probably just a general interest, and I mean, well, more than a general interest, perhaps you know, someone who's, rather than just and you can develop this, you don't necessarily have to have it naturally, as long as the general interest there, you can then build on that. But someone who is, you know, quite a follower of many different influencers and is used to consuming kind of influencer content, I think that's huge for us. You know, we couldn't, it would be unlikely, I mean, and they probably wouldn't want the job, but it'd be unlikely that someone would work in an influencer marketing agency if, for example, they didn't have social media at all. You know, you need that understanding of social media and how these influencers are communicating with audiences. Some kind of interest in there is big, and if you've got that, then start looking into the paid work that they do, start looking into those hashtag ad posts that they're making, trying to come up with your own conclusions as to whether they're good or whether they're not, how they make you feel, whether they make you want to do something. That's a big one. And the second thing for me as well, and this doesn't just mean kind of, you know, coming over from another industry, because some of, you know, the people that I know might be listening to this might have not had a full-time job yet and probably haven't, is transferable skills. And you can build them from kind of, you know, part-time roles that you juggle alongside, you know, maybe school or college or whatever as well. So, and even further as well, you know, we've got people from so many different fields. No one has ever got a job at Fluential. Well, because actually, I don't think anyone's applied because the industry's so new, who's had experience from a competitor agency to us.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're all from different fields. We've got someone who came from TV, someone who was a qualified paralegal, you know, working in law, someone who just fresh out of uni, who'd just done a marketing degree, and someone who'd done an apprenticeship at college as well. So, you know, it's it's looking at those skills. Law kind of factors into this because we deal with contracts and we're contracting those influencers. TV because we're organizing people, but even with part-time jobs as well, the customer facing stuff, we have to deal with clients. So there's all these skills you can build up at not any age, but the moment you kind of hit a part-time working age at least, that work for us.
No, thanks. That's really interesting. And as I say, in a market where the workforce is going to get crowded quite quickly, I reckon, as I say, there'll be lots of young people out there who will be following loads and loads of influencers, and they'll probably think, I follow loads of influencers. As I say, I could definitely do this kind of role. I find it really interesting when you say actually no, is when you start asking questions about it that sort of set you apart. As you say, how are they doing this? Why are they doing this? Are they doing it well? And as I say, it's having that analytical approach to it as well, actually. Which is really useful. And I will prefix this next question by saying in advance, I know there's no such thing as a typical day. Happily throwing that right out there, no, there's no such thing. But if you had to sort of maybe talk me through sort of a day with Influential and what the good days look like and what the challenging days look like, what would they be?
Okay, sure. I think, yeah, it's like you say, typical days is tough. We're a very flexible company as well. So we a few of the team work in the office Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Some of us, myself included, tend to only go into the office kind of one day a week and work from home. So it's very trusting place here, where it's kind of like, I think it's very visible if you're doing your work or not. So you're given that kind of trust to do it how you see, how you think you'll perform best, and I'll know if it's being done or not, and that's always worked for us. But the typical day, if we're in the office, obviously there's going to be a lot of chat between us, a lot of use of the table tennis table, but then a lot of the day-to-day work itself tends to be more, the bulk of it tends to be the finding the influencers, negotiating with the influencers, and approving content and making sure that it's how we want it, creating briefs for those influencers. That's kind of the day-to-day. So that, I guess, your kind of worst day will be doing that, which, if that sounds fun, then brilliant. That'll be the worst, unless you have like a problem with an influencer. That's fairly rare. But the best days are probably kind of the field days, where you go out, where we've got a racetrack booked, or there's some kind of live event we're sponsoring, or we're throwing a massive party, and they tend to happen probably less since, obviously, in the past couple of years for obvious reasons, but a fair few times a year, probably 3, 4, maybe 5 times a year, and they take a couple of months to prep as well. So you're there's almost always one of those in the works, so you can kind of always almost be working on something like that most of the time.
No, amazing, thank you. And the next line of questioning I wanted to go down is I wanted to speak to you specifically about being an MD, if it's okay, in terms of, like, if you don't mind me saying, for a lot of people, you will probably break the mold as a managing director, but sort of with your age, again, if you don't mind me touching on that, but
Yeah.
so what kind of skills do you feel you've had to develop, whether they're soft skills or personality traits, as I say, sort of being the managing director of an organization, especially, it's not just, you're not managing an organization on something you're not keen on, you're managing director of, something you're really, really passionate about as well. So what kind of skills have you had to develop in that role?
Yeah, so there's kind of I think there's 3 main skills that apply to any industry. If you want to be an MD, if you want to be in charge or whatever. And the first one is the actual work. So you need to be able to do the work, because you need to understand what the people that you're hiring are doing. If not, nothing will ever make sense to you. Number 2 is sales. You, as an MD, a lot of the time, unless you, especially in a small company, your own company, if you haven't got someone in charge of sales or bringing in new business, you're the salesman, or you're the salesperson, and that's me. So I'm in charge of pitching and developing pitch decks, identifying clients to work with. That's like the number 1 part of my job. And number 3 is people. You have to develop people skills and know how to work with people and help people, because if a client has a problem, the sad reality is they're probably not going to want to talk to the staff. They're probably going to want to talk directly to me. So I need to be able to resolve that, and also manage my people as well, the people who are working for me. I need to know how to deal with them, how to help them when they're struggling, and how to make sure I'm getting the most out of them as well, so that our clients get the most out of them.
Thanks, I appreciate that, and I'm just thinking back to my personal experiences where I've definitely worked under managers and sort of managing directors who maybe haven't known the exact job that we've been doing. You see what I mean? So I appreciate someone, you know, being aware. Like, no, that's a good trait to have. And going on to my final question, really, and I'll actually put a little spin on the way I usually ask it, sort of just to relate to the last question, which is, if you could go back and speak to say yourself at sort of 17, 18, you know, before you had sort of maybe, you know, this management experience under your belt, and before you'd learned from any achievements you'd had, mistakes you made, etc., what's the one piece of career advice you would go back and give to your younger self based on the things you've learned?
I think you know, I tried to do this as much as I could anyway, but just kind of taking every opportunity. I think one of the things that I did as well when I was younger is I left sixth form early, and I didn't actually set up this company. I had the plan of doing sixth form, going to uni, and the funny thing is I left sixth form early, and I didn't start doing this until the age at which I would have finished uni anyway. Now you could argue that the decisions I made are what led to this, but equally I don't think they did, because I wasn't really in that gap. I didn't do a great deal that led to this. So I think, you know, I think the biggest thing for me has been kind of doing what I enjoy and taking opportunities that make sense. And I think there are definitely ones that I didn't take that maybe could have got me here quicker. So I think just trying to identify those and putting yourself in the position to get those opportunities, kind of you make your own luck in the way that you throw yourself into things and then suddenly things start happening. So, you know, talking to the right people, trying to start conversations with people in industries that you want to work in, starting to get to know people. That's the biggest thing you can do, really, is kind of networking and knowing people and taking those opportunities.